Welcome to the February 8th, 2016 County Commission meeting. I'm going to call on Sheriff Fuson to call the meeting to order. If you would, please remain standing for the pledge led by Commissioner Sokol and our invocation led by Chaplain Joe Creek.
All rise. Oh yes, this Honorable Board of County Commissioners is now in session pursuant to adjournment. Now may God save this state and this Honorable Board of County Commissioners.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
It says in the Bible in Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, "Trust in the Lord with all thine heart, and lean not unto thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths." Let us pray. Our Father and our God, we thank you for your love and your watch care. We thank you for this legislative body and their willingness to serve. We just pray now that the weather situation will not get severe, that everything will be able to travel and without any serious incidents. Now just lead and guide us, direct us tonight as we vote on these resolutions, and when our views differ, let us respect one another. For it's in Christ's name I pray. Amen.
Amen. Commissioners, if you would, please register your attendance. With this new system, Ms. Jackson, I can't see who's registered and who hadn't, so I'm just going to, when you get ready, if you would, please announce the attendance.
We have 21 present.
Thank you, ma'am. Just a reminder, at our informal session the other night, we talked about our voting system, and I sent an email out to all the commissioners today and talked to Commissioner Vallejos as well. Tonight, we'll be using the system. It will not show how commissioners vote until all the votes have been cast, but we are working on a solution to that. And as I said, I talked to Commissioner Vallejos. We're not trying to circumvent anything that the commissioners want to do, but I think it would be a lot easier than trying to vote on everything by the raise of a hand tonight. So without objection, we'll use the machines as they're programmed right now. Our first item of business is our approval of our January 11th, 2016 minutes. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Butts. Second, Commissioner Jason Hodges. Any discussion on our minutes? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 abstentions, 0 noes.
Thank you, ma'am. With our new system, Ms. Jackson asked me to talk real slow, so I'm going to talk real slow. Our next item on the agenda is our zoning resolutions. You good?
Yes, sir. I was trying to answer Mr. Tripp. Mr. Tripp, on the microphone, we just discovered when we turn ours on, it turns his off. So we're turning ours back on.
I was talking about the vote for the approval of the minutes is still up on the screen. No, it's not. It never did show.
I'm sorry, that's not my microphone.
We'll work through this. Under our zoning resolutions, the first item is CZO-1-2015, a resolution amending the text of the zoning resolution of Montgomery County, Tennessee in its entirety without amendment to the zoning map designations. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Robert Nichols, second. Commissioner Riccone. Any discussion on CZO-1-2015? Seeing no discussion, if you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 abstentions, 0 noes.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Vallejos?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Even with the present system, till we fix, going back to the way we had talked about, should it show after we voted, how they voted?
There's supposed to be a second screen. There's supposed to be a second screen.
Or-
It should. Oh, it did for like a half second? We'll
Brother,
keep
this
that-
gets a little more time on that one.
we'll keep it up there a little bit longer.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention. Next is item CZ1 2016, application of Sid Hedrick from AG to R1. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Redd, second. Commissioner Tooley. Any discussion on CZ1 2016? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
21 yeses, 0 abstentions, 0 noes.
Thank you, ma'am. Next on our agenda is CZ2 2016. This is the application of Doug Hildreth from AG to R1. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Baggett, second. Commissioner Keene. Any discussion on CZ2 2016? Commissioner Genus.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to ask the commissioner from that area what his recommendation or her recommendation is on this one here, or how they're.
I think that's
As they-
Commissioner Harper's district.
It is.
And Commissioner Genus, I think he's going to speak to that. Is that correct, Mr. Harper?
I am. Thank you,
Okay.
Mayor.
Mr. Riggins, are you okay if he jumps in front of you and speaks to that and then lets you speak? Okay. Commissioner
Actually,
Harper.
If it's all right, Mayor, I'd actually like Commissioner Riggins to speak first.
Okay.
Either one.
Commissioner Riggins.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to speak on, I provided everyone with a sketch at your station. And I want to say this is a very rough draft. It was turned in with the traffic study, so it's public record. Again, just want to remind you, it is a very rough draft just because of the early stage this development is in. And as you can see, it shows access to the north and then over to the east side to the south also. Of course, that could change, possibly upon development, there may be there's potential for a stub to the west to the already zoned for residential property there. And speaking on that, I just want to bring up that the existing properties to the west and the northwest on the map, the Nelson property and the Halliburton property, they are already rezoned. They have already been rezoned to residential back some years ago. Also, the Planning Commission staff, both the staff and the commission, voted unanimously to approve this. Meets all conditions of zoning ordinance and the growth plan that this body has voted to approve. And then also, I just want to bring up, this is the first zoning case in the 8 years that I've been paying attention, whether it's through the city or here, that we've had a zoning case on 41A in Sango on 41A to residential that has no public opposition. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Riggins. Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to reiterate what Commissioner Riggins has said. I'm very supportive of the rezoning in the area. I've spoken with Mr. Hildreth. I greatly appreciate the opportunity to get some more homes in the area. I think it's going to be great. We're very excited about it, so very supportive. I appreciate your support.
Thank you, Commissioner Harper. No further discussion. If you would, please register your vote on CZ2 2016. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 abstentions, 0 noes.
Thank you, ma'am. Next, on to our resolutions. Our first resolution is Resolution 16-2-1. This is a resolution to acquire certain real estate located at 4662 Old Ashland City Road, adjacent to the Fredonia School. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Albert, second. Commissioner Jason Hodges. Any discussion on 16-2-1? Commissioner Vallejos.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be voting no on this. I had asked when we first brought this up that we were gonna get this on the intention of saving something historical, something that has something to do with our, our history of Montgomery County. And not being from this area originally, I found it important to, to save it and have something for generations to come. But at the same time, we also talked about not pouring into it. It's going to be a slow process down the road. And so gotten probably about 4 emails from some of my constituents. And one of them was, simply saying, I thought we were going to take their time, and I assured her I wasn't going to vote for it, but I understood her concern. So I just think we just need to slow down here, stop everything. We've already purchased it. I just don't think it's a good use of our taxpayer dollars. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Commissioner Vallejos. Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. Last meeting, at our informal meeting, I asked the question if we could split this property off. To date, I've received no information on that, so I'd like to table this resolution.
Okay, is that in the form of a motion?
It is.
There's a motion to table. Is there a second? Commissioner Gannon? There's no discussion on the table, correct? No discussion on the table. The motion is to table Resolution 16-2-1. If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 13 yeses, 8 nos, and 0 abstentions.
It doesn't require 2/3. I don't think it requires 2/3, but we're going to check. I think it is too.
Sorry, gentlemen and ladies, just always want to be right. It's just a majority to table.
Okay. 16-2-1 is tabled. Our next item, 16-2-2, has been pulled from the agenda. Item 16-2-3 is a resolution to amend the budget for the Agricultural Extension Office for fiscal year 2016. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Riggins. Second, Commissioner Gannon. Any discussion on 16-2-3? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 20 yeses, 1 no, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item on our agenda is Resolution 16-2-4. This is a resolution amending the budget of the Montgomery County Assessor of Property. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Riggins, second. Commissioner Vallejos. Any discussion on 16-2-4? Commissioner Riggins.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to reiterate what I spoke about last Monday night, that the 2 key points, reasons for me to support this is in spending a little over $200,000 in benefits and salary, we are projected to gain over $2 million in annual revenue by being able to responsibly capture all of the properties that are transitioning from either vacant lots to lots with houses on them, or from farms to subdivisions, things of that nature. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Riggins. Commissioner Genis.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last week I had a lot of questions. I spent a couple, 3 hours investigating, looking into this, talking with the folks on the expenditures of the dollars. And after further research, I also concur that it is a wise investment at this time to allow the additional employees and I just wanted to clean up from last week. I had some pretty hard questions, and I want to thank everybody. They were all answered, so I definitely will be in support of this.
Thank you, Commissioner Genus. Seeing no further discussion, if you would, please register your vote on 16-2-4. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 20 yeses, 1 no, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item is Resolution 16-2-5. This is a resolution requesting the Industrial Development Board to consider and submit an economic impact plan for the Civic Plaza Development Plan. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Jason Hodges, is there a second? Commissioner Keene? Any discussion? Prior to discussion, I'm going to ask Mr. Harvey if he would, what you had in your packets last Monday night has been changed. I think we indicated that, Mr. Harvey, and I think there's a red-lined copy that's in your packet, but I will ask Mr. Harvey to briefly go over that.
That's correct. Last Monday night, the informal session, you received a document and there was discussion at the informal session about the development of the document, and there would be some changes. And then I think the next morning you were sent out a copy of those changes that were revised. So what you're looking at today and what's attached to the resolution is the red line copy that shows the changes that we thought would be in the resolution and indeed are in the resolution. That red line copy, it's got red and blue in it. You should have that. Did you all have that in your materials? You all received that the next day. All right. So that red line copy was given to you in that fashion so you could see the exact changes, find them pretty clearly. The resolution then with the changes made has been given to you. So this is the final of the document. It's what I'm calling a clean copy. So that's what you're voting on in the resolution. And the resolution is to ask that this be forwarded to the IDB, for the IDB to schedule and to have a public hearing. And the public hearing is necessary to receive information from the public and then for someone to act further. So there's, this is the starting point of the plan. It's the starting point of a public hearing, and you're asking the IDB to have a public hearing in that regard. They can schedule a public hearing with no less than 14 days' notice. And that's the resolution.
Commissioner Vallejos?
Thank you, Mayor. So, I want to make sure I hear you correctly. This is not approving the TF. This is simply approving so that the IDB can go forward with the public hearing.
Yes, the final plan is not yet approved. Mark Mamontoff is the attorney we've associated from Bassberry and Sims out of Knoxville. Mark's here tonight who can speak to the process, but I think he'll nod his head that this is not the final plan. It would belie the value of a public hearing if you already had a plan and it didn't matter what the public thought. So this will be receiving information from the public, but it is a starting point. And it does have, for example, the TIF district as a starting point that's attached there. It does have certain limitations on it, the timetable, the amount of indebtedness that can occur, how it will be spent in percentages. So it's a starting point for the public hearing to occur.
Okay, I got another question here. So as it goes forward, at what point do the fact, we're not on that committee that's initiating all this. At what point, or are we able to make amendments to this plan or changes to this plan?
We'll ultimately approve a plan that comes out of the IDB process, or we'll disapprove a plan that comes out of the IDB process. Okay. Your question is whether or not you can specifically control the specifics of it. And with the exception of interplay between us and the IDB, then we're ultimately going to get something back from them to approve or disapprove. I want Mark, if he would, to step up and give you some sort of timetable on that so you can be familiar with the timetable.
And while he's stepping to the mic, I think Mr. Vallejos or Commissioner Vallejos' question, I think you could, if there was a certain amendment you wanted to make tonight, you could make that amendment, and that would go forth to the Industrial Development Board as amended.
Yeah, that's true. I'm sorry if I misspoke. For example, in here we say that of the incentive money, we're going to use 7% of it for the operation and maintenance of the park long term. If you were to say, I want that to go to 8 or I want that to go to 6, we can make those recommendations at this point, but it's still a working document and has to go to the IDB for the public hearing.
Okay, so that I want to make sure I'm understanding you. Once it proceeds from here, and there's no changes to this document, there's no amendments, there will be no longer an amendment opportunity, and it's either going to be a yes vote or a no vote. Am I correct? Once it comes back to us.
Well, we don't have a final document.
I understand.
Let me let Mark talk to you about the specificity of how much is actually required on coming back for the yes or no.
Okay, I understand it, but before he speaks, I'm still trying to get the clarity here. Is there a point where once it passes us, we're not going to have a say to amend it? Is there a point of no return?
After it comes back and you pass it?
Where's that line? When is that deadline?
When it leaves here tonight.
Yes.
You'll have a chance to have input at the IDB level. Whether they can amend the plan that comes from the IDB, I want you to speak to, Mark, if the commission will allow.
There'll be a public hearing at the IDB. I'm sure they would welcome your input, but they then submit to you. You have final say. When it's submitted to you for final say, people take different views of it, but if you make any substantial amendments to it, I would suggest that it needs to go back to the ID for another public hearing so that they can let the public have input on your amendments, and then it would come back to you again. So if you wish to make suggestions now, it would be really helpful so we can let the IDB know. You can let the IDB know anytime during the process as it's ongoing, and then if you're unhappy with the plan when it comes back to you, you can say, I'm not happy with it. We think it needs to be amended in this way, and then it would go back to the IDB again, and to do it that way. So is that what you were asking?
Yes.
Mr. Mamontoff, correct me if I'm wrong, but if nothing happens tonight, it goes to the IDB, they have their public hearing, they vote on it, comes back to the commission votes on it. In 6 months, we could amend that document. Is that correct? It'd have to go back through the public hearing process
Exactly.
through the IDB.
Yes, you'd have to have a...
So it will be amendable in 6 months from now. It would be amendable in a year from now and 5 years from now. Does that?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I'm just concerned about oversight and different things that I got so many questions. Even after seeing this document, I just have so many questions, and I think I'll just allow you to speak, and then maybe I don't want to take all the time from my fellow commissioners. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Vallejos. Thank you, Mr. Mamontoff. Commissioner Gannon?
That was my main question. Are we going to have a chance to amend or make because it's a thick document and there's a lot of stuff in here. Are we going to have a chance to amend it when it comes back from the IDV, or is that the final say-so or part of the project?
I want Mark to confirm this, but I think it's the phrasing of your question that causes me concern. When the IDB goes through their vetting process and they send a document back, then if we vote to adopt that document, we have a plan. Now, long-term, we can always move to amend by having another public hearing and going through the same process that we're doing now on this original document. But I think when it comes back, and Mark, please just make sure we're all right. When it comes back from the IDB, we'll come back with a yes or a no, but we'll be discussing that, we'll be amending that, and before you vote up or down on it, we can go back to the IDB with more input.
Right. So when you say it comes back to this body and we vote up or down on it,
That's correct.
When we vote up or down on it, yes or no, at that point, if we make any recommendations or changes to it, then we would go back to another public hearing.
Before you vote up or down, we need to let the IDB know about changes we're looking at.
Right. And then this is definitely not the final.
That is definitely not the final document.
Okay.
But it is a starting point.
Right.
It is a starting point. Help me, Mark. I'm on track, aren't I?
Well,
No, I just don't want to interrupt. You're doing so
well,
well.
I think if there is a certain issue that you have this evening with it, I think tonight would be the opportunity to make an amendment that keeps you from going back and doing another public hearing with the IDB once it comes back to us.
Absolutely. If there's a part of it you want to discuss tonight
Yeah.
before we send it to the IDB, we're sending the IDB a document to get started. If there's something in here that someone wants to talk about to amend for that initial starting point, then sure, we're missing our chance if we don't do that tonight.
Commissioner Harper.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to propose the First Amendment on the basis of our conversation. I'd like no more than 5% of project funds to be allocated to any one project.
Is there a second to that amendment? Second, Commissioner Vallejos. We are voting on the amendment, Ms. Jackson, and it's to change the verbiage. It's currently at 7%. That will be committed to back to programming and maintenance of the plaza, and that number will
No.
change.
Mayor, there's 20 million allocated towards the TIF. What I'm saying is no one project could actually have more than 5% of that financing.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
I'm concerned. I want to make sure we maximize the effect of the TIF so we have as many participants in it as possible.
I totally misunderstood you. I'm
No-
sorry.
No problem at all.
I'm sorry.
The 20 million that's in here is just, if I may, Commissioner, the 20 million that's in here is just a cap on the overall bonding authority that's given in this plan, correct, Mark?
That's correct, yes.
All right, so
As I understand what the Commissioner is proposing is that there would be no more than, no one project could get more than $1 million of TIF financing as to it's 5%. So no matter the size of your project, you could not get more than $1 million.
right, but that's not the 5% that's in here that talks about the operational
Yeah,
cost.
I think it's totally unrelated to the
Totally
operation.
unrelated.
Yes.
Totally unrelated.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, theoretically, that's the case. We see, I mean, comparable TIFs we see for downtown type projects anywhere from, I mean, you often will see them in the $1 million to $1.5 million range. $1 million's a little bit low for a larger project, but often most TIFs are $1 million or less for downtown redevelopment projects.
Commissioner Riccone, you speaking to the amendment?
I would just like to ask Mr. Mamontoff, I mean, in drafting these for various other jurisdictions, is that something that you see and that's normally or usually included, or is it something that?
I don't normally see that. Normally, if I see a limitation, it's usually a percentage of the overall project cost. In other words, you might see a 10% limit. In other words, to make sure that people have lots of skin in the game. So often you'll see, say, a $10 million project that no more than 10% of the project cost can come from the TIF. I see that limitation a whole lot more. I thought that was clever. I'm not trying to promote one or the other. I just had not seen that before. I usually see it differently as to we don't want to see too much TIF money going into a specific project, usually not a limitation on the thing, but maybe nobody ever thought of it, you know, but no, I've not seen that before.
Commissioner Sokol?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd ask the Commissioner Harper if he would be agreeable to also include in his amendment that if a certain project needs further funding, that they come back before this commission for approval, and that we make the ultimate decision on the cost.
Let's not include that on the amendment.
All right, I'll hold that and make that a separate amendment.
Okay. Commissioner Redd, on
Call
the
for the
amendment?
question on the amendment.
Sir, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Call for the question on the amendment.
Calls for the question. It's not discussed, but it takes a 2/3 vote.
There's a call for the question to cease discussion on the amendment. We're voting to cease discussion on the amendment only. If you would, please register your vote. Give Ms. Jackson a second, please. you would, please register your vote. Ceasing discussion on the amendment. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 9 yeses, 12 noes, and 0 abstentions.
Okay, we're still discussing it. Commissioner Gannon, discussion the amendment.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to see if Commissioner Harper, he mentioned $1.5 million.
If you would, I know some people are having some trouble, just pull it up there a little closer to you. It's wireless.
I can walk around with it too, right?
Yeah.
I'd win the pool if I walk around with it, right? There's a. Mr. Mamatoff mentioned $1.5 million project.
You got your finger on the button.
You mentioned $1 million. It's flashing green. Now it's red. It's not working right. No, I'm kidding. Mentioned $1 million to $1.5 million. Some are $1.5 million. I was seeing if you'd take an amendment to make it 7.5%, which would give the upper band of $1.5 million rather than $1 million. Okay.
Are you going to accept that as a friendly
I
amendment?
will accept that as a friendly amendment.
7.5 of the 20 million?
7.5%, yes.
Commissioner Vallejos, your second, do you accept that? We're still discussing the amendment, which is now 7.5. Commissioner Riccone?
Mine is just maybe a point of clarity, and I think I got my answer from Commissioner Harper. Are we just going to set it at $1.5 million, or if we're going to use a percentage, is that percentage going to go down as the available funds are less as people draw on it? So if there's 10 million left, is it 7% of the remaining balance? And we have to run calculations based upon how much money is available, or are we just going to say it's 1.5 million limit per project? And I'm in full support of it. I just don't want us to trip over this later if there's only $2 million left or $5 million left and we're back on a percentage that's less than what we thought it was.
Commissioner Harper, do you want to address your intent there?
Yes. Thank you, Mayor. In my mind, on the amendment, I was setting a hard cap at the $1.5 million level. Commissioner Sokol, would that address what you asked earlier? Is that amenable to yours as well?
When I make an additional amendment, he wants to make it separate. It doesn't matter what the amount is.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Riggins on the amendment, please, sir.
Yes, sir. I just wondered, are we, in some cases, would we be giving possibly too much to one project? Or would we be better off at the 10% of the total amount that's going to be projected to spent on an individual project? It seems to me like that would be the better option. That way it's comparable from project to project. I don't want to hamstring ourselves. We get somebody coming downtown want to spend a great deal of money to the point they possibly may want several of these tracks to redevelop. I don't want to hamstring ourselves, but it seems like to me if we make it based like traditionally everyone else has and limit it to the amount spent on the total amount spent on the investment, is that something you'd be willing to? I know that's another friendly amendment, but.
My concern, Commissioner Riggins, is say we pass this and someone comes in with a $20 million project, soaks up the entire TIF, and now we have a district that we can't approve anything for. And while that project may be great for the community, I think there's power in numbers, and the more business owners that we have involved in the TIF district, I think the better off we're going to be because there's a multiplying effect to that. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Mark, commissioners, will you can I ask him to respond to your question about how much of the TIF increment? It's limited on what it can be applied to. So when you talk about a $20 million project in total costs, you're probably not talking about TIF funds available to do 100% of the total project, no matter what.
It would have to be a much larger project than that, right?
Right. So are you talking about whether there's a cap on the maximum of approvable TIF funds that can be applied to any given project?
That's exactly what I'm saying.
Okay. Can you speak to those options, Mark?
Yeah, I think either approach could work fine. My 2 cents worth, to the extent you want it, is that these are extremely good points, and I do think that either a overall max on a specific TIF or a percentage of the project, or both, would be totally appropriate to have in thing. But one thing I would maybe encourage you all to consider maybe is, if you decide you want to move forward with the concept of using TIFs downtown, is to go to the board and say, we also want you to come back with policies and procedures for us to consider. The economic impact plan that you're looking for, that's sort of like the Constitution. That's like the big picture. Then a lot of communities adopt TIF policies that I would really encourage them to bring back to you all, and the statute specifically allows that. Those sort of things where you really get down into details, you can amend them a lot easier, you can waive them a lot easier, and you could deal with things like maximum percentage you want on thing, maximum size. You'd have like a TIF application form. Who is that going to go to? Is that going to go to the IDB, or is that going to go to the county administration? You know, those sort of details, I would, if I were you all, I would probably suggest that you say, look, IDB, we'd like you to move forward, but we also want more bones on this skeleton, and would ask you all to come up with some TIF policies on how are you really going to implement this on a day-to-day basis, and how would you recommend it, and sort of probably do both at the same time, because I think that you'll find that there's a lot of issues like what you're talking about right now. How long do you go? Some TIFs don't need the full 20 years. They may only need, based on their financials, 10 to 15 years. And those are the sort of things that you may want to address in separate policies. There's nothing wrong with doing it here in the plan itself, but often, as someone was asking about amending it, it's a whole lot harder to amend that than to just bring the policies back to both the IDB and to the commission and say, hey, you know, this is not working the way we thought. Let's just amend these policies to try to make it either a little bit harder or a little bit easier to do the TIF. And again, to make clear, you're not voting on anything tonight other than the weird way, I guess you could say, the law works is this. It's really the IDB's plan ultimately. They have to submit it back to you all for approval. But if I were sitting in your shoes, I'd want to. This is a fairly significant step for the community to take, because I do think, given the level of sophistication of this community, and think that you would want policies and procedures to do that. I wouldn't encourage you to do the 200 pages ones that Memphis might have, but something realistic I think you all would find very helpful.
Commissioner Redd?
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick question. On this $20 million, does the TIF board or the TIF members decide approval of the funds, or does this body?
So that if approved without any policies or procedures in place, then the Industrial Development Board would have the authority to make the decisions on individual ones. And that ultimately may be the right place to house that. And that's what, though, I would suggest that you may want to also adopt policies and procedures that say, this type of project, we'd like you to bring it back to commission, or as long as in this type of area, you run with it, as long as it doesn't exceed a certain size or something. Those are the sort of things you could deal with at a policy level.
But the agreement, the way it's written now, it would be the TIF board or the TIF members decides.
The Industrial Development Board would make those decisions,
okay,
like how to best use that $20 million of maximum borrowing.
Okay.
But please remember this, that's the plan. Those are the specifics, and those are the procedures, and those are the outlines, and those are the policies that come back to you for this next vote. We're starting at the top of the funnel, authorizing the IDB to conduct a public hearing and then develop a plan and come back to you with that plan. And our interaction with the IDB, I'm not suggesting this is what you want to do or don't want to do, but our interaction with the IDB will continue while they're trying to develop a specific set of plans to come back to this body to move forward. But this is where we have to start with a public hearing before the IDB can move forward.
Seeing no further discussion, we're going to vote on the amendment. Mr. Harper, do you want to restate, would you like for him to restate his amendment, please, ma'am? His microphone.
Thank you. The amendment was to place a cap of 1.5 million for the maximum TIF contribution
On any given
on any given project
within the district.
within the district. Thank you so much, Tim. Appreciate it.
No, I'm,
No, you helped.
I was trying to be helpful, sir, not
You were.
disrespectful at all. Thank you.
Okay, everybody clear on the amendment? We are voting on the amendment to Resolution 16-2-5. If you would, please register your vote on the amendment. Does anyone wish to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 19 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion on 16-2-5? Commissioner Sokol?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to request another amendment to this resolution that if any single project exceeds the cap identified by Commissioner Harper, that they come back to this body for approval of any other funding past that cap.
If a plan ultimately is approved, and again, I always want to defer to Mark, but if we ultimately get a plan, we ultimately have the procedures in place, then it's going to be restricted to, I mean, that plan's going to have parameters in and of itself, and you're going to be restricted to the 1.5 million. So when you say come back and have more than 1.5 million, will that require another public hearing?
I think what is being suggested would work fine. I think that what it would be is being suggested is that the plan be changed to add some language to the effect of the $20 million, not more than 1.5 million can be allocated to a specific project of the debt, which we have to identify a project, and I think that will be fine. But that amount can be increased with the specific approval of this body, basically, as I understand it. And so I've never done that before, but I'm just off the cuff. I don't see a problem under the statute with doing what Commissioner Suckles was suggesting.
We have a motion to amend 16-2-5 by Commissioner Sokol. Is there a second? Second, Commissioner Redd. Any further discussion on the amendment? Ms. Jackson, do you have that amendment? Basically, any project in excess of 1.5 million will have to come back to this body for approval.
Yes, sir.
If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 13 yeses, 7 noes, 1 abstention.
All right. Amendment number 2 passes as well. Any further discussion on, excuse me. Commissioner Harper, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to make an amendment on page 4, the percentage right now that's for the upkeep for the property. I'd like to increase that from 7% to 10% to greater allow that's 10%.
That was the 7% I thought you were talking about earlier.
Yes, exactly.
Is there a second to Mr. Harper's amendment? Commissioner Albert? Any discussion on Mr. Harper's amendment? Ms. Jackson, do you have that one?
Page 4, the percentage of the upkeep of increase, it increased from 7% to 10% to allow, and then I did not hear you after that.
Well, it's in actually the third paragraph. If approved by the state as described above, it now reads 7%. It would read 10% of each allocation of TIF revenues shall be paid by the board to the county to be used by the county or the county's designee to program and promote events at the plaza and to maintain the plaza in order to promote economic development.
It's just subbing the 10%
Just
figure
take-
for
just changing
7%.
the 7 to 10.
Okay, thank you.
Seeing no further discussion on amendment number 3, if you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Any further discussion on 1625 as amended? Commissioner Gannon?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mayor. Final approval is IDB only. Can it come back to the commission after the IDB does it? Is that?
It will.
It has to come back to this body. The IDB cannot approve this plan. All they can do is submit it to you. for
No, I meant
approval.
a TIF.
Oh, a specific
You're
TIF.
talking about a particular project.
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
I'm sorry, I
It-
didn't understand your
yeah.
question.
If I could just make a suggestion, I understand, I think, what this body wants to do, and I think that if somebody would make a motion, the chair certainly can't offer a motion, but for the IDB to establish his policies and procedures,
Right, that's where I was going.
then I think we can address all these concerns in that document. And so if they bring a document back to us, Mr. Mamontoff, you correct me, if they bring a document back to us that, or we can convey to them that, hey, that we want this ability to be able to approve every single project or projects over X or whatever that may be, then I think that could all be handled in policies and procedures.
Right, and that's where I was heading.
Okay.
Basically.
Didn't mean to interrupt you.
You were good.
Sorry.
You did perfect. So I'd like to make an amendment that we get a policies and procedures document portion of this.
Request the IDB as part of this to create a policies and procedures document.
Right. And then when we get that back, then we can make adjustments to that as well.
Is there a second to that? Commissioner Reagan, second. Commissioner Vallejos, do you want to speak on that amendment? Commissioner Harper?
I do. The question would be, would we consider both this plan and the policies and procedures at the same time?
Is that to me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it is.
I'm sorry, I don't want to intervene. Yeah, the answer is I would highly recommend that you do, because I think it'll give you the full picture and allow you to have more of a informed vote when it comes back. So if this passes, I would encourage us to work with the IDB's council to immediately get to work and share drafts. If any of y'all have comments on it during that process, then we can certainly do that.
If that's the case, Mr. Mamontoff, then my suggestion would be that we table what we have here, waiting for the policies and procedures to come back, and we vote on both of those at the same time, to be prudent.
I think I want Mark to speak to this. Mark is one of those attorneys that works in this area regularly. I need to be careful about gilding the lily, but I will tell you his expertise is well known throughout the state. He's been involved in TIFs for a long time. I'll ask him to speak to one issue, and it is a little difficult in this concept. I think that we have to get started and send something to the IDB, and the IDB has to conduct this public hearing before they can start developing those specifics.
This has been an interesting process because it's been, you all been so proactive so early on. Legally, theoretically, the IDB could have just gone and drafted a plan and said, here, commission, do you like this plan, without coming to you all at all. That's what my history with that is that's not very productive because, if commission's not interested in somebody doing a plan, they're sort of wasting their time. So, for example, in my home county, in Knox County, you typically go to the county commission and say, are you interested in us moving forward with that? And then they draft a plan and then they come back, which is sort of what we're doing here today. And I guess if I were in your all shoes, do you all want to move forward and ask the IDB to come back to you with both a plan and policies together together, if that's what you're saying. I think that would be a good idea. So are you really just conceptually, are we interested in developing a TIF program for downtown is really what you're being asked for tonight? And if the answer is yes, then we can definitely come back, work with the IDB's lawyer and their representatives and come back to you all with a plan. Commissioner Gann, you asked a really key question is, we could have drafted this so that every single TIF in the downtown area, first of all, you only can use TIFs to the IDB for certain types of projects, which will be apartments, retail, office space, things like that. So we could have come and come to you with every single TIF that comes downtown. And that's really a policy call, whether you want to do that, or we're trying something a little bit unique with you all. This is common to do through, again, I don't want to get into too much of the weeds unless you all want to go through, have redevelopment plans through housing authorities for downtown, but we're trying something a little bit unique with the Industrial Development Board, but it's very analogous to what we've done a number of times through housing authorities. And so, which is to basically to establish the parameters for an area, and if you're in an area, is so that you would not have to come back to you all. If you all prefer to say, we're just going to do policies and every single TIF is going to come back to us, that's your all's call. We could certainly do that, but this was intended to try to, candidly save on legal fees and all that stuff, having to draft every single plan every time somebody shows up in the downtown, in this area to basically hire someone like me to come and help with a plan. So we're trying to be sensitive to cost and things like that but we can draft it so that as many deals in certain parameters come back to you all, or as few as you want, and ultimately you all get to call the shots on all of this. The board can't do anything ultimately without your approval. Sorry about the speechifying.
Do you still want to table? You want to table this going to the IDB?
Yes.
And do what?
And we'll reconsider it when there is a policies and procedures that is developed to present to us. And we'll consider it all at the same time.
And respectfully, and I'm sincere when I say that, the policies and procedures will be developed by whom?
The IDB. Isn't that who's going to develop them?
I would think so. And so this is the format for that request, to ask them to begin that process, to develop that and send it to you. And so the informal request I make of them, I want to follow the vote of this body in that regard, but I think what we're doing is asking the IDB to develop a plan and send it back to you for consideration. And so if we do not vote to do that in this fashion, then I think at some point we're going to need to take some vote to have us tell the IDB what we're looking for, and at some point they're going to have to schedule a public hearing and get started. And I don't know the vehicle really other than just someone call the IDB. As Mr. Mamontoff said, if an IDB came to you with a plan and said, will you approve it, then you would be looking at that plan. If the IDB is not really working on a plan at the moment, then when they'll come and bring something forward will be up to their timetable. Am I correct, Mark?
Yeah, and I wasn't sure whether Commissioner Harper was suggesting whether you're wanting to table everything or basically say, look, conceptually I like this idea, IDB, go forth, come back to us with the plan and the policies at the same time, and we'll vote on them together at that point.
Conceptually, I look at it and I say, we've got part of a plan. I want to look at the entire thing. I want to know the policy procedures actually, I think, govern the way the plan works. So therefore, I would have major problems voting for the plan without knowing what the policies and procedures are at all. That's the way we're going to govern the plan.
All this really is requesting the Industrial Development Board to consider and submit an economic impact plan for the Civic Plaza Development Park. It specifically says, and then present it back to the county for consideration. So I think to what Mr. Harvey said, and Mr. Harper, I agree with, I understand you want to see it you want to vote on it. I understand that.
Right.
But this is the beginning of the process to start putting all that together that will then come back to this body and be voted on and approved.
I realize maybe I'm a tad naive. I haven't been involved in government that long, so pardon me for that. But to me, we want the IDB to come up. We know that. And let's place a call and say, work on this, bring it back to us, and let's get started, because, I've looked at this just a couple of days, and there were easily a couple of glaring things that I thought needed to be fixed. There's probably 5 to 7, 8 amendments that I could make tonight on this that we've already got. I think there's a lot to consider within what we're doing. And frankly, just looking at it for a week may not be enough time for many of us to come to a decision on whether we want to pass this. And I just think it'd be prudent to have all of that information at the same time. And if the IDB brings us a plan we have to make amendments to, then we go to another 14-day period for a public hearing to bring it back to us where we made further amendments. That doesn't seem to me to be the most efficient use of time. I think time's of the essence. The sooner that we can get that TIF district going, I think the better off we'll be.
Let me just say this to you, just for clarification purposes, and I'm not trying to be rhetorical at all when I say this, but the genesis of the idea to pursue a TIF in whatever form the statute might allow came from this body through a resolution and through the budget committee. So the beginning discussions were motivated from these chambers, and I'm not really sure when the IDB could have done it without our request. The IDB can do it with our request. They can schedule a public hearing and move forward and then present that to you. I'm not sure I can predict the timetable within which the IDB will act absent our request and our assistance on helping them develop a program. It's just that timetable, because you said a sense of urgency. If we say to the IDB, we'd like, if I just call them and say, I think there's some people that want you to do that, I just don't know the timetable within which I can expect them to do that work.
Commissioner Redd?
I just have a point of inquiry. Was there a motion to table? And if there was, I would like to second it.
I think there was a motion.
Okay, and there was a second?
I don't know if there was a second.
Okay, I second it.
We're voting to table Resolution 16-2-5. Commissioner Nichols had buzzed in to speak.
We really should just vote on the motion.
On the point of clarification, if you will, in order to vote for it, I have a clarification on, if we don't include the policies and procedures and it goes forward, then when it comes back, that's the point where it comes back and we would have to have an additional public hearing. Is that correct?
You'd have to have an additional vote.
Okay.
But you've got a motion to table, you've got a second, there's no discussion on it. You vote on the motion to table. I will suggest to you a motion to table is different than a motion to remove it from the agenda for a definite time. So I would like to ask the commissioner, is your motion and your second to table it or to move it to a specific date, which routinely we've discussed as the next hearing date? Moving, Commissioner?
I'd like to amend my motion. What I'd like to do is, rather than table it, I'd like it to be deferred until such time as the policies and procedures are developed where we can bring both of those to our body. Is that more succinct?
You seconded his motion, which was motion to table. He's now clarified it as a motion to defer. You need a specific date, Commissioner. I think you'd say defer for 30 days in this body. I think we've routinely said defer to the next meeting.
30 days is fine. Yes.
Well, I think we don't necessarily meet in 30 days, so we usually say to the next meeting. Okay. All right.
There is a motion to defer this matter to our next meeting. Any discussion on the motion?
There's no discussion.
It's not a table.
It's the same thing as a table.
It is?
Yeah.
Commissioner Vallejos, I'm sorry, I've been advised same thing as a table. If you don't want it, don't vote for it. It's all I don't mean that smart, but Ms. Jackson, do you have this amendment or this motion to next regular scheduled meeting? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
Slide it over. We have 10 yeses, 11 noes, 0 abstentions.
Motion to defer fails. Any further discussion on Resolution 6-2-5? Commissioner Gannon? Yes, sir. I was coming back to you if you'd like to restate your motion.
You did an elegant job of it last time. If you wouldn't mind helping me restate it.
It's an amendment to require the Industrial Development Board to develop policies and procedures that will follow this plan accordingly and that will come back before this body for approval.
Yes, sir.
Is there a second to Mr. Gannon's motion? Commissioner Keene?
It was already seconded. Yeah.
I already did have a second? Okay. I'm sorry, we just restated it. Do you have that?
Yes.
If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 20 yeses, 1 no, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Commissioner Vallejos.
Thank you, Mayor. Pertaining to the city's part, what can our attorney tell us?
About
Their participation.
the only thing I have been told is that they make no commitment at this time on the TIF. They've also retained counsel, and Mr. Mamontoff has talked with them about some concerns they have with the plan. So I think that the interpretation of that is in the eye of the beholder, but I clearly have been told that they make no commitments on it as is. We've sent them to them as they've been developed, and they have retained counsel, which have discussed with Mr. Mamontoff whether the plan has any failure to comply with the statutes that govern the TIFs. And Mark and I have talked about it, and he's addressed those, and I suppose any statute is subject to interpretation. Some of his comments tonight were that you're bringing up some ideas that maybe he's never addressed before, and sometimes in statutes, you look at what the statutes say, but Mr. Mamontoff assisted in the development of the statutes that were passed by the legislature. I feel pretty good about his opinion, and he's addressed those topics, and I think he's prepared to say he thinks he's developed something that complies with statutory requirements, and I certainly think it does.
I mean, obviously, I wouldn't have drafted something working with him if I didn't think it complied with the law, but the city has hired excellent counsel. There's really 2 firms in the state that really do a lot of this work, and they're sort of my friendly competitors, and I had a long discussion with them on Friday about some of their points. They're core point, I mean, they made a number of points, but their core point is in their judgment, the law, you know, they readily agree that the Civic Plaza is an eligible project to be within this TIF area. What they're arguing is that you have to do, going back to your comment, Commissioner Gannon, is you have to do each TIF separately. In other words, you have to go through the economic analysis each time. I explained to them and pointed to them some language in the statute, which I wrote, so I know what it was intended to mean, whether I wrote it as clearly as they wanted it to be, but I wrote the language, so I know exactly what it was intended to be, which was to allow you to use one project to leverage other projects. And so it really comes down to a basic, either, I don't want to say misunderstanding, or basic just sort of feeling of how the statute is worded. This statute, these laws are largely administered by the Comptroller's Office. They keep quite a bit of oversight over them, and what I've discussed with the mayor and with Tim is during this period that hopefully we may be moving forward with something that I would be glad. I would suggest that Tim and I and the mayor sit down with the comptrollers and go through it with them. Candidly, we're trying to do this as cost efficiently as possible for you all, and if we had to go back to you for every single project, it's just not the most efficient way to do it. And the housing authority, as I mentioned before, you could do it that way, but you have no legal relationship with the housing authority. The county does it. It's purely a city housing authority. So if you want to go through a board which the county has a relationship, the Industrial Development Board is the way to go. And so you know, I believe the law perfectly allows what we're planning on doing, but I would also recommend that we go sit down with the comptroller, because we're going to need the comptroller's approval, as I've told Tim and the mayor several times, of certain aspects of this. And so let's chat with them and make sure they're on board. And I certainly go over my thinking and sort of the history of the statute and where this language came from. So I'm hoping, certainly, I have a great deal of respect for the lawyers that they've hired and want to obviously work with them in a positive and proactive way to make this work for the community. I mean, there's no doubt that we can make a TIF program work for you. It's more of the process than the way to do it. And I believe the process we propose to you all works just fine. But you know, we'll continue to have those discussions with the city's lawyers.
If I could just add, if you're okay with it, Commissioner Vallejos and Commissioner Redd, I'll get to you in just a second. If I could just add a little something to that, it is my opinion, and these two gentlemen aren't going to say that right now the city's position is in an adversarial position from the emails that have been exchanged. And quite personally, I'd like to see the city removed from the document in its entirety, and then as this process goes through, if they want to approve it and be added in, then we can amend the plan to do that.
So I'd like to make an amendment that everywhere city is mentioned, it be striked.
There's a motion and a second. Commissioner Redd was on the button.
Well, you can call on him now for sure. Or are you out of order, Commissioner Redd, if he calls on you now? Did you?
I want to call for the main question before the amendment was made, but I'm for the amendment.
Okay. Okay. So we have another amendment to remove the city of Clarksville from the economic impact plan, wherever they're mentioned. We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Commissioner Harper was the second. If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 18 yeses, 3 noes, and 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Back on 16-2-5, voting on as amended. Does anyone need us to go through the amendments? Everybody pretty clear on the amendments? Commissioner Vallejos.
Thank you, Mayor. On the question on the committee on the IDB, is there an opportunity to place another commissioner on the IDB board itself?
I would, if you're asking me, I'd have to look at the structure of the IDB at the moment, but
Unless it's a joint IDB, county officers and officials are not allowed to serve on it. So I think this is the Industrial Development Board of Montgomery County,
Yes.
and by statute, county officials are not allowed to serve on the Industrial Development Board.
Mayor Dirt's informed me it's not a joint board too, so.
Oh, it's not a joint board. Okay, then I'd like to see if we can get somebody on that board, an additional county commissioner.
Well, that's what precludes us from having a county
So
commission.
we can't.
It's an independent board of the commission. It's independent of the commission.
Okay.
Okay, is there a motion to approve 1625 as amended? Commissioner Riccone. Is there a second? Commissioner Hodges? Jason? Any discussion on 16-2-5 as amended? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change your vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 19 yeses, 1 no, 1 abstention.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item is 16-2-6, a resolution amending the budget of the Montgomery County Juvenile Court. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Brockman, second. Commissioner Genus. Any discussion on 16-2-6? He was? Commissioner Johnson, if you're okay, Mr. Truitt told me Commissioner Sokol was first. Yeah, you have no problems with that? If y'all would, give Mr. Sokol the microphone and then go back to Mr. Johnson. Commissioner Sokol.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to request that the commission defer this until the next county commission meeting. In Rule 4 of the county commission resolution procedures, one of the steps is that any resolutions coming before the body is supposed to go through the appropriate committee. Now, since July, which is when they identified the problem, we have had 2 committee meetings of the Jail and Juvenile Committee. And this resolution and the problems associated with it were not addressed at the committee meeting. We have one scheduled for, I believe, Wednesday, and I would ask that we defer this until next month so that we have an opportunity for the juvenile section of the court to be able to present this before the committee.
Defer to our next regular meeting.
Yes, sir.
And that we have a second by Commissioner Vallejos. Commissioner Johnson, do you have anything you want to add?
Actually, that was what I was going to say.
Okay.
There are a lot of questions about this resolution. There are a lot of unanswered questions. There are a lot of surprises here, and that is exactly what I wanted.
Okay. Thank you, sir. We have a motion to defer 16-2-6 to our next regular meeting. Any discussion? If you would, please register your vote. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 abstentions, 0 noes.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, on to our reports filed. Our county clerk report. Commissioner Albert.
On the topic of unfinished business,
Yes,
I'd like to, if it's proper, to make a motion to bring back 16-2-1 from being tabled.
Is that? That's okay. We have a second by Commissioner Jason Hodges.
And just a comment, and I'll apologize to Mr. Harper if that request was supposed to come back from me about dividing the property. But I did ask that question to several people. And I think with...
You should vote to remove it from the table.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So we're voting to remove from the table?
If there was a second,
We have a second.
takes a majority vote to bring it back from the table to the body.
If you would, please register your vote to remove item 16-2-1 from the table to bring it back before the body. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 10 yeses, 11 noes, and 0 abstentions.
All right. Motion to remove from the table fails.
Since it's been tabled, does it die if nobody brings it back up next meeting?
This meeting.
So it's done then?
That's the difference in the table and the deferral to a specific
Yeah.
date.
And I just wish that would have been clarified before that vote.
Commissioner Albert?
Then I'd make a motion that we defer until the next regular meeting.
You have to, it's still on the table,
Yeah, still on the table.
still on the table. So the only proper motion is for someone to make a motion to remove it from the table,
Which has occurred.
which has occurred.
From the table next meeting, though.
It'd have to be refiled at the next meeting. If something is moved to the table and it's not brought back up in the same meeting, then it dies.
It could be brought back up in a different resolution next month, is my understanding.
Yes.
All right, on to the reports, the county clerk's report. Ms. Jackson, would you please read your report?
Comes Kelly A. Jackson, County Clerk, Montgomery County, Tennessee, and presents the County Clerk's report for the month of January 2016. I hereby request that the persons named on the list of new applicants to the office of Notary Public be elected. The oath and bond of the Port Authority official and the oath of the Deputy County official are approved as taken. You have Beverly Taylor that has bonded, and we've read her name into the minutes. You received your list of notary applicants for this month, last week, and there are none signed by personal surety.
Thank you, ma'am. Is there a motion for approval of the clerk's report? Commissioner Butt, second. Commissioner Sokol. Any discussion? If you would, please register your vote. Does anyone want to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. Under your reports filed, you'll see the two that were on our informal agenda. There's the remaining ones are new to your report. Bring attention to the capital projects quarterly construction update report is in there. Is Mr. Powell here? Yeah, Mr. Powell's here. I don't know if anybody has any questions about that, but he is here. And also to item number 6, the trustee, a letter of undisputed property taxes that was brought to us today, and we was informed it needed to be brought to the county commission and brought to their attention. With no questions on the reports, the nominating committee, Commissioner Nichols.
The Community Health Foundation has deferred until April its 3 positions that need to be filled, and the Health Board has nominated Dr. Pike to fill the unexpired term of Dr. Vaughn, and Dr. Pike's expiration of his term is October 2016.
Is that in the form of a motion?
Yes, sir.
Is there a second? Commissioner Riccone. Any discussion? If you would, please register your vote on the nominating committee nominations. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
Under County Mayor appointments, Judicial Commissioner Alonzo Giles nominated to serve a one-year term as a new part-time Judicial Commissioner, term to expire February 2017. Is there a motion for approval? Commissioner Riccone, second. Commissioner Brockman. Any discussion? If you would, please register your vote. Commissioner Gildersleeve. Thank you, sir. Would anyone like to change their vote? Ms. Jackson, would you please tally the vote?
We have 21 yeses, 0 noes, 0 abstentions.
Thank you, ma'am. There are no announcements, and without any further business, Commissioner Genus.
Thank you, Mayor. Just one quick announcement. I got an email today, and I passed it on to Jeff, and then if you check your emails in reference to APSU, President White is going to be giving a briefing at 11:30 this Wednesday at the Morgan University Ballroom in reference to the expansion of Austin Peay and their relationship to downtown and what their vision is of the future. And it is open to the public. Media will be there. Again, it's at 11:30 this Wednesday at the Morgan Center. And I just think that that really fits in with the Civic Plaza, our TIF, and it just kind of blends together to see where their vision, our vision, and things like this are going on. And it'll be an interesting briefing if you're available. That's the announcement.
Thank you, Commissioner Genus. Any other announcements by the commissioners? Commissioner Albert, do you have one?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a reminder that there is a public input meeting this Thursday night at Mount Hermon Baptist Church there at Gerald Ridge Road and Highway 12. We'll be talking about the Gerald Ridge Greenway and also the Fredonia School.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Albert. I missed that. I apologize. Any further announcements? Sheriff, would you adjourn us?
All rise. Oh yes, this Honorable Board of County Commissioners now stands adjourned. May God save this state and this Honorable Board of County Commissioners.